I noticed something unusual and gulped hard. In front of me was a display monitor with the power still on. I had just been on a video call with my mother-in-law, who lives far away, showing her 3-year-old son. "Thank you for everything. Please let me see my grandson's face again on the video call." The call, which should have ended with such a friendly goodbye, remained uninterrupted, with my mother-in-law still on the screen. I must have pressed the wrong button or something. What does she usually do in her daily life? It was a mischievous curiosity that suddenly arose. I watched the screen for a while, hoping that my mother-in-law did not notice. Then, all of a sudden, I saw a shadow behind my mother-in-law. Ha! I thought she lived alone. The moment the person of that figure appeared clearly on the screen. No way! What is that? My heart jumped. Without a pause, I involuntarily shouted, "Mother-in-law, behind you!" I am a former housewife with a 3-year-old child. The reason why I am a former housewife is simple: I divorced my husband. My ex-husband Devi is the worst scumbag ever. I can only say that my marriage to him was due to a youthful indiscretion. I wonder how much happiness I had during the few years of our marriage. If there was such a time, it would not be between Devi and me. It would be between me and our child. Devi was not only not present when our child was born, he was gambling. He tried to touch our child with his hands, which got dirt from gambling, and we got into a huge fight, causing trouble with the doctors and nurses, which I still feel bad about every time I think about it. After that, my husband was not interested in the growth of our child, and instead of playing with him, he went out for gambling or went out drinking at a cabaret club. When he interacted with our child, he would only give him sweets that he received as prizes from the gambling game. Giving something like that to a child who is still sleeping in a crib doesn't add up to anything. It would have been better if he had worked, but all the money Devi spent on playtime was earned by me. No matter how mad I got at him, he would always take the cash out of my wallet. When he couldn't find the money, he would just stay home and drink until he was wasted. Of course, I thought about getting a divorce many times. But Devi stubbornly refused, saying, "Why should I give up my bank machine?" He stubbornly refused to get a divorce. If it were just me, I could have disappeared from Devi's life and started over. But with a child, that would be difficult. My parents had already passed away, and I had no money to hire a lawyer. I had no one to turn to. So, with tears in my eyes, I left my young child at kindergarten and worked as an office clerk during the day and at a snack bar at night, cutting down on my sleep. Even if I had to take some money out of my pocket as a result. But my mother-in-law saved us from such a shitty life. One day, Devi gave me the worst word ever. "Hey Nasha, where's the money? I made a mistake and impregnated a woman. Damn, she's so hungry for kids, it's so messed up how she could be pregnant so easily. Give me $5,000 so I can abort the kid. That'll take care of it." What the hell is this guy really thinking? He is not sincere to me, to women, to children, to anything. Why should I have to cover your ass when you cheated on me? I don't have any money. Besides, what the hell do you think your children's lives are? You have no sense of responsibility or guilt when you make a child out of your own shitty desires and treat it lightly, like throwing it in the trash. My passionate rebuttal did not make a dent in Devi's feelings. He never listens to me and goes through my bags and wardrobe. I couldn't stay with him any longer. Who can I turn to? Then someone came to mind. It was Devi's mother. Although our relationship was not very strong due to Devi's bad behavior, we had met each other once when we got married. Later, when our child was born, I sent her a letter. With such a shallow relationship, my mother-in-law was the only person I could talk to about my problems. If I am not careful, there is a possibility that my mother-in-law is just as bad as Devi. But my life was already bad, and I couldn't care about having it even worse at this point. If there was even the slightest chance of a positive turnaround. With such faint hope, I called my mother-in-law. When I called her to discuss Devi's situation, she sighed deeply. He is the same as ever. Then there was a long pause. To be honest, I knew somehow that my mother-in-law did not want anything to do with Devi and the people associated with him, since she had not replied to my letter when our child was born. I knew it was a dead end. That was when I was about to give up. I have no choice. I don't want anything to do with that son of mine, but I have to do it for the sake of my cute grandson. I'll do my part. My mother-in-law's words brought tears to my eyes. I had not yet asked her what exactly she was going to do. But I wondered when was the last time I had someone on my side. I'll be there tomorrow, so please do your best to keep Devi there. Saying that, she hung up the phone. I was grateful that she was coming this way, but what on earth is she going to do? Despite my concerns, I kept Devi here as she told me. Stay home for the day and I'll think about the money for abortion. I didn't want to say such a messed up thing, but I knew that if I didn't do this, Devi would go out again. Then his mother arrived just before noon. Devi glared at me when he saw her, complaining, "Why is the old bitch here? Don't you know the reason?" My mother-in-law said as she looked at Devi, whom she probably hadn't seen in a long time, with a rather contemptuous look in her eyes. Then she took out an envelope, a divorce paper, and a piece of paper with a few sentences on it. There is $300 in this envelope. It bothers me to my core to give you a portion of my inheritance, since you didn't even show up at your father's funeral, but I'll give you this money and you can divorce Nasha. And promise me that you'll never show up in front of again, have anything to do with your kid, and beg us for money. Promise me these 3 things. This is a written pledge that sums it up. Put your name and seal on it, and then go wherever you want. I had no idea what my mother-in-law was going to do, but I was against the idea of giving Devi any part of my father-in-law's inheritance, so I tried to stop her. But my mother-in-law looked at me and shook her head. Devi's mood changed from the grumpy mood he had when his mother visited our house and said, "Seriously," and filled out the divorce papers joyfully. And once he signed his name without even reading the pledge form, he stood up to check inside the envelope. Okay, there is indeed $300. I'm happy for you, Nasha, because now you're free from me. I'm glad to get rid of a woman like you who can't even make money. Well, good luck with the kid." With these words, Devi happily left the house. Not even half an hour had passed since my mother-in-law had arrived at our house. Did I really break up with Devi? I didn't really feel like it, but I had to thank and apologize to my mother-in-law anyway. "Thank you so much. And I am sorry. I never thought that you would give him money. And it's my father-in-law's inheritance, isn't it? I will definitely give you the money back." Then my mother-in-law turned her palm to restrain me and shook her head again. "I told you, didn't I? I did it for my grandson. To be honest, I wouldn't have helped you if it was just you. It's not right for you to be fooled by a scumbag like Devi in the first place. Besides, no words would resonate with him. Money and law are the only things that mean anything to him. So don't worry about it." She then approached my son and said, "Hi. How are you?" and played with him for a while. I asked my mother-in-law how she had been doing. Apparently, my mother-in-law had been living alone since my father-in-law passed away. Since her only son is Devi, it was inevitable. After about 15 minutes of small talk, my mother-in-law got up and started getting ready to leave, and says to me, "I'm going home now. Now that Devi and you have broken up, so you might not see me anymore, but I want you to make up for the time he has stolen from you and be happy." I was taken aback by my mother-in-law's words, and as she turned to leave, I involuntarily called out, "Wait. I don't know how to thank you yet, and besides, I don't have to cut ties with you just because I cut ties with Devi. If you don't mind, would you like to come live with us?" Looking back, it seemed like a little too much to propose. It could have been taken as an attempt to get her to help me pay rent after getting her to pay me to break up with Devi. She didn't seem to have such ideas, and she said, "Thank you," but she wasn't keen on moving in with me. "The only way you can repay me is to raise my beautiful grandson. It's not necessarily about paying me the money back. I know you're being kind when you talk about us moving in together. But I don't want to give up my house, and even if you come here, my place is too rural for my grandchildren's future. So I'm fine with the way things have been." With these words, my mother-in-law left the house. Since then, I have been living a comfortable life, as if my life up to now was a lie. The only thing that still bothers me is my mother-in-law. I could understand that my mother-in-law was right and that raising my son well would be a way to repay her kindness. It was for the sake of my son that I broke up with Devi in the first place. However, as I was thinking about what else I could do, I suddenly heard the phrase, "remote work," while watching TV. That's it. My mother-in-law was very caring about my son. I want to show her how my son has grown up. So I decided to buy a computer and gave it to my mother-in-law so that we can have video calls. I was able to give her the present sooner than I had expected. Since I have not changed my working style from before and I work day and night, it has become overwhelmingly easier to save money just because Devi is no longer around. I visited my mother-in-law's house to set up the computer and internet, etc. At first, my mother-in-law tried to refuse, saying, "You don't have to worry about that." But I said, "I owe it to you to raise my son well, right? If that's the case, it's strange that you can't see it, isn't it?" I tried to convince her. As expected, my mother-in-law could not resist the desire to see her adorable grandchild. As proof, my mother-in-law, who was a little hard of hearing, was happy to hear her grandson's voice on the video call because she could wear earphones and adjust the volume. Since then, my mother-in-law and I had video calls 2 or 3 times a month. I think we have become closer than before. One day, while we were spending those days together, my mother-in-law told me that she had recently become forgetful. Although my mother-in-law is still in good health, she is fairly old. It is not surprising that this is the case. However, I have also heard that worrying too much about it can actually make it worse due to stress. I told her that it was better not to worry about it too much. But the situation seemed to be more serious than I thought. According to her, she had been having trouble remembering what she spent her money on, and she often lost her jewelry and other items because she did not know where she put them. My mother-in-law and I live a reasonable distance from each other, so it is difficult for me to check with her every time. I thought it might be useful, so I suggested that my mother-in-law send me a message whenever she spent money or took off her jewelry as a reminder. That way, I could check and remember with her during our video calls. My mother-in-law, as expected, began to hesitate, saying, "It's not that bad." But in the past few months, I have learned how to break through her reticence to a certain extent. I persuaded her, "You don't have to worry about that." And finally she took me up on this suggestion. She seemed to have also worried that she might develop even worse memory loss in the future. Although I may have triggered her anxiety a little, it was natural for me to want to repay her for her kindness. It may be a bit arrogant of me, but my mother-in-law would not have depended on me if I did not do this. However, as it turned out, this method did not solve the problem very well. In fact, she said that the number of times she forgot things had decreased, but there were still times when she miscalculated money or lost accessories. "I wonder if I'm forgetting to even call you with my notes. What should I do? I might lose my bank book, credit cards, and other important things if this keeps happening." She was no longer the dependable figure she had been when she had made me leave Devi, and she was almost crushed by her anxiety. "Let's go see a doctor sometime together. There should be a treatment for memory loss nowadays." That's about all I could do. If my mother-in-law is really suffering from dementia, I want to take care of her until the end. I am prepared to do that. My mother-in-law must have understood that I was serious and said, "Thank you." "Then, please." Then, my mother-in-law said it was time to end today's video call, and I agreed. My mother-in-law said, "Okay, bye," and made a motion to hang up the call and removed the earphone. However, I guess she made a mistake and her place continued to show up on my computer. I could have just ended the call and there would have been no problem, but to be honest, I was a little curious to know what kind of life my mother-in-law usually had at home. My mother-in-law's house was an old Japanese house, with many of the rooms separated by sliding doors instead of walls. My mother-in-law usually left those sliding doors open, probably because she lived alone and did not need to close them. So even with the camera on my computer, I could see a little bit of the back room. As I peeked into my mother-in-law's life for a while out of curiosity, thinking how spacious the house was, I suddenly saw something else moving besides her. At first, I thought the screen might have been disrupted due to the internet environment, but apparently that is not the case. It was definitely a human shadow. The figure was moving from room to room without being noticed by my mother-in-law. Then I recognized the figure. It was Devi. Devi rummaged through the wardrobe and shoved my mother-in-law's jewelry and money into his pockets. I knew I could not go on like this and shouted, "Hey, behind you." Then, my mother-in-law, who had her earphones turned up quite a bit, seemed to hear me even though she had them off, and was surprised, saying, "What?" It seemed that my mother-in-law was not the only one who could hear me, and Devi also shouted, "Oh my God." My mother-in-law recognized his voice and turned around to look at Devi. "You bastard! Have you lost your mind?" she shouted as she got up and chased after Devi. I knew I couldn't do anything, so I called 911. I explained to the police that I had been on a video call with my mother-in-law, and they dispatched a police officer to the scene. As a result, Devi was caught by the police officer who received the request and taken to the station. During the interrogation, Devi gave up his home address, where some of his mother's accessories were found. They were all items that my mother-in-law thought she had lost, and from the record of messages between my mother-in-law and me, they were able to prove that Devi had took them from her house. From his confession to the police, it was discovered that Devi had taken money and accessories from his mother-in-law's house on numerous occasions. The reason for the crime was that he was being extorted. Apparently, the woman Devi had impregnated had a half-deviant boyfriend, who found out about the abortion and put Devi through a lot of pain. The $300 given to him by his mother-in-law disappeared in the blink of an eye, and he was visiting her house and taking money and goods in order to pay the half-gangs. Incidentally, the reason he did not come to my house was because he thought it was going to be troublesome because of the pledge and that he had no money. It was Devi's fault that I had no money before, and now I have a good amount of savings. Why doesn't he realize that he had no money because of me? Also, Devi's arrest seemed to have led to the arrest of that half-deviant as well. After Devi was sentenced to prison, I went to visit him with my mother-in-law once. Devi asked his mother for forgiveness. "You know, Mom, please forgive me. I did it because I was forced to do it. Can't you just drop the report now? Hey, please. This place is crazy. Somehow, by mistake, the guy who was extorting me is also imprisoned here, and I don't know what he's going to do to me. I'm asking you to do me a favor. You gave birth to me. You can't just abandon him, can you? Look, I'll change myself, and if you want, I'll write another pledge or whatever. So please." Hearing Devi's superficial words, his mother sighed deeply. "I feel sorry for myself that I had to go through the pain of giving birth to a person like you. You say you couldn't help it because she forced you to do it, but if you had cared about Nasha and your son and not cheated on her, you wouldn't have gotten involved with a girlfriend like that in the first place. The fact that you got her pregnant, you got hurt by the gangsters, you got extorted, or you got thrown into jail, all of it was your own fault. There is nothing that can't be helped. If you understand that, you'd better grow up and reflect in jail." My mother-in-law said this, and told me, "Let's go home," and left the visiting room. Later on, my mother-in-law and I went to the hospital for a memory loss test just to be sure, but it was still caused by stress. With Devi's arrest, her forgetfulness gradually subsided, as money and goods were no longer stolen, money was no longer miscalculated, and I no longer lost my jewelry. I still have regular video calls with my mother-in-law. If I had not left Devi at that time, my son might have become the son of a criminal. I vowed to repay my mother-in-law for destroying such a possibility by continuing to love my son and raise him well.